Albert Einstein was a superstar, not just for today, in today's news about the Nobel Prize, but also back in his day, he was also a superstar. Everyone wanted a piece of Albert. And this obsession didn't die with him. It remained after his death. And the mania was such that they snatched his brain out of his head just like a walnut out of the shell. He never wanted this worship. He never wanted it. He left very specific instructions to scatter his ashes so there's no monument for people to go and pay homage and those kind of things. Our question for today is, are we more than just physical beings? Let's look at three areas and a few Einstein quotes on the subject that might help us out here. What happened to Albert's brain after it was snatched out? Is that all Albert was? And some questions for us to consider this morning. What happened? What happened? He was 76 years old when he passed. And in 1955, it was determined he had died of an aortic aneurysm with it. Dr. Thomas Harvey removed the brain for what's called medical research. And he never returned it. Interesting, he kept it at his house. And when he left Princeton, no one heard of it or saw it for the next 40 years. Needing some atonement, he went back, reaching now 80 and feeling really guilty. He located Einstein's granddaughter in Berkeley. And picture this with me. A journalist offered to take him to Berkeley on the West Coast from the East Coast. So picture this with me, this road trip that these gentlemen made in a Buick Skylark with Einstein's formaldehyde-soaked brain floating in a Tupperware bowl. Does that bring sights and smells to you? It must have made for some really interesting conversation on the trip. And when they got there to his granddaughters, Evelyn's like, what do you want me to do with it? You know, what am I supposed to do with it? And here's the quote. The smell of formaldehyde smacked us like a backhand. The pieces were sealed in celluloid, the pinkish, liver-colored blobs of brain rimmed with gold wax. They felt squishy. And they weighed about the same as very light beach stones. That was the quote. So they checked it all out, and then they put it back in the Tupperware bowl and kind of closed the lid on Albert's brain. Everyone at the time, and even today, still wants to know, is there anything physically different about the brain? Is it like some of these serial killers that shows brain damage or whatever? And I read a lot of conflicting stories, and there's no conclusion. You know, we just don't know enough about it today to it. The question goes back to, is this all that Albert was? Was this E equals MC squared, a concept that changed the world? Was that somewhere in the back of Albert's brain physically? And to quote Albert, a child asked him if scientists pray. And here's what he said. Scientific research is based on the idea that everything that takes place is determined by the laws of nature, and that therefore this holds for the actions of people as well. For this reason, a research scientist would hardly be inclined to believe that events could be influenced by a prayer, i.e. a wish addressed to a supernatural being. Could Einstein, all of his genius, his ideas, his passions, be limited to brain matter? Or even just restricted to his physical body? Ultimately, is this all any of us are? Purely physical beings living by physical laws alone, excluding emotions, ideas, creativity, the way a stomach secretes peptic acid or a liver secretes bile. It's interesting, a marriage proposal, picture this. In this circumstances, you'd kneel down and say, we've had a confluence of physical vectors. Let's get married. Everything, our thoughts, our desires, our choices be predicted the same way they predict the motions of the stars. If we're the products of purely physical forces within a physical universe, then everything can be boiled down to matter and motion. Could the whole ever be more than the sum of the parts? It kind of all hinges on one question: how did we get here and why? Sharing a few of Albert's quotes on this, I want to know how God created this world. I'm not interested in this or that phenomenon. In the spectrum of this or that element, I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details. Another one that kind of connects. In my view, it's the most important function of art and science to awaken the religious feeling and keep it alive in those who are receptive to it. Third quote. When the answer is simple, God is speaking. From these quotes, you can see that there's a tension going on that Albert accepted between God versus matter and motion. In conclusion, I believe that we're more than just pinkish, liver-colored blobs and purely physical beings. What do you think? Mr. Toastmaster.